Hello, my name is Mark O'Keefe. I'm executive editor for Herald-Standard.com. With me today is Fran Zajac. Fran is a reporter with Herald-Standard.com, and Fran kind of does a lot of different things here at the paper, features religion, and a lot of different things. And in that vein, Fran recently did a story about the unfortunate passing of George Esper, very legendary reporter for Associated Press, best known for his work in Vietnam. He was the longest foreign correspondent in Vietnam, reporter for Associated Press. His story was on the front page of newspapers, including the Herald-Standard, but front pages all across America during the Vietnam War. Was the last guy there. One of only three that whenever Saigon fell and the North Vietnamese came in, and they came in and overtook the AP office there. George was there and got the story out that day. Probably a very memorable story for George. Landed on the front page of the New York Times that day. So, and of course, George was from Uniontown. Actually started his career at the Herald-Standard, at the Morning Herald, a predecessor of the Herald-Standard. But George, after Vietnam, he came back to the United States, was named a special correspondent, I believe.
Yes.
And then he covered a number of stories, the Jonestown stuff, and did a lot of different things, and then finally retired in 2000, and then went to work at West Virginia University as a journalism professor. And I know you kind of knew him a little bit before that, but that's really when I got to know him. And he would often come up here and talk to reporters and talk to editors and kind of give us his experiences and stuff. And it was always great. It was great talking to him. He was always very friendly and more than willing to share his knowledge and expertise. And so we all got to know him pretty well during that time. So it was sad, but I think it was kind of gave everybody a moment to talk about his life and what he meant to everybody, and so it was kind of a good thing on the other side of that. So what were you did the story, and you talked to the family members and everything. And I think it is the one thing about George, he was such a nice guy.
He was. Everybody, that's the number one comment, that he was a good man, a sweet man, a kind man. And he would always throw it back to you, though, that you wanted to talk to George about his experiences, and he would tell you them. But he would always ask, how are you? What are you doing? What are you up to? Interested in everybody's lives, their careers. He mentored a lot of students. And he was always a friend of the Herald-Standard. He never forgot where he came from.
Yeah, he was always, that was one of the things. I mean, he was very proud of coming from Uniontown, and always talked about, how amazing it was growing up here and all the great people here, and then talked about the Morning Herald and working here and how that really kind of gave him the foundation for his journalism career, because really he did major in journalism in college.
Right.
He was, I think, a phys ed major. But somehow he kind of drifted into reporting in newspapers and really just loved it, and really was the consummate reporter.
He was. He was. Everybody said he was tenacious, that he wouldn't give up. He just kept on, finding a way to get the story.
And one of the things that he stressed, though, too, is don't be rude.
Yes.
And a lot of times, I mean, sometimes reporters may cross that line or whatever, but like he would say, no, don't be rude, but just hang in there. He talked about the one story about where he, I think it was, they were doing some type of story about Kent State in the...
Might have been the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, something where they were, and there was one mother that they hadn't been able to talk to, one of the victims, I believe. And so he went there and knocked on the door. Well, she didn't really want to talk, but he just kind of, and it was snowing. He had dropped in this raging snowstorm, but he gets there and then she doesn't want to talk. So he just kind of like stood outside, kind of hung around, the snow's falling all around him and everything. And finally the woman kind of felt sorry for him, invited him in, and then he was able to talk to her and got the story. So it's that perseverance, that relentlessness that really was a hallmark of his career. like you said, he was very humble, very down to earth.
Yes.
And Chris Martin, who was used to be worked here. She was, did a number of things for us. She was assistant features editor for a time, and then she later became the dean of the journalism department at West Virginia University, and was very instrumental in bringing George back to West Virginia. And I thought she had a really good quote in an Associated Press story where she said that he was the celebrity, but he treated everybody like a star.
It's true.
He made you feel good. He would always talk about, like, oh, you're doing such a good job, and yeah, you guys are really out there, and and stress the importance of journalism and why it matters to people and for our country, really.
That's true.
So.
That's very true. I thought it was interesting too this week that AP reported that Vietnam issued their own condolences to Esper and his family. Yeah. And I guess they sent the foreign minister to the AP bureau in Hanoi. And the letter, I guess they wrote, said in part that he was a kind and caring gentleman and friend whose professionalism, tenacity impressed us. So I thought that a government would come out and say those kind words about him.
Yeah.
That really meant a lot.
Well, I remember he said that, like, after when the North Vietnamese soldiers, when they entered the Associated Press office and stuff, and he got to talking to these guys, and like he said, they just seemed like they were so much like their American counterparts, and they had kids and families and that sort of thing. But I think that was just the way George was. He could probably talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. He just had such a great manner in that regard. But I think it's kind of funny in a way, but if he had been around now and say, like, you had the Vietnam War and stuff, he'd be on TV all the time.
Oh yes.
It's just kind of back then it wasn't as widely known and everything, and so people really probably didn't know him as well maybe as they do, like the reporters that, like, when we had the war in Iraq and you had the embedded reporters and all that sort of thing. This is what George was doing. I mean, he wasn't embedded, he was out there. I mean, that's such a tough job to be a war correspondent, to do that for 10 years. It's just incredible, and he really was one of the all-time great reporters, and it's just kind of a shame that people don't kind of recognize that enough here. He really is one of the most accomplished people probably to ever come out of Uniontown.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Traveled all around the globe, and I mean, he's probably in contact with so many world leaders through his work. Tragedies like Jonestown and Oklahoma City bombing. Besides the wars, he was also there for the first Gulf War. Right. And like you said, just doing those aftermaths of the Kent State shootings. But then he went back to Vietnam in peacetime and opened the bureau there in '93 for AP. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you got to see the bad and the good.
Right. Right. And then even when he did come back to West Virginia, one of the things that I've been reading a lot of stuff about the West Virginia students, and how bad they all felt, because they just loved him, because he just had a way of making people feel special. And I mean, how could you not come away too with talking with him when he would come up here and he would talk to us, and then, boy, you just would feel like, and I got to go out and get that story, or I'm complaining about this, and here this guy was 10 years in Vietnam, So it really was very inspiring.
I would agree.
So we're gonna miss him, and it's just a shame. But he did live a very good life. I believe he was 79.
79.
And he did have a lot of health issues there at the end. So, but he certainly made an impression and on a lot of people. And like I say, will definitely go down as one of the most accomplished people ever to come out of Uniontown. So, okay, well, that's going to wrap it up for our segment today. Thank you very much for watching. I want to thank Fran for sitting in with us. See you later.